Would you mind to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Sure. So I'm Lars van Aert. I'm born in the Netherlands, a very small industrial organized country in Western Europe. And at the moment I live in Romania, in an area called Transylvania.
Where the Draculas are from.
Where Dracula lived and where there's lots of vampires.
You live with the vampires.
Yeah, exactly, there.
That one.
That's the place.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And before you moved there, you were a vet. Can you share with us a little bit about what that was like for you?
So I studied veterinarian medicine. And so I worked 15 years as a vet, mainly for large animals, farm animals. And one part, I love to be outside, I love to be with animals, I love to wear boots and walk around in barns and shit and smell the animals. And so I was in my element there. And at the same time not, and less and less. I worked in France most of the time. And I saw that the diseases that I was treating, most of them, almost 90% I would say, or more, were directly related to how the animals were housed, how they were kept, or how they were fed. So that brought questions to me. And I also saw that the farms had to grow bigger and bigger every year. The tractors and equipment needed to be bigger and bigger. The barns needed to be bigger and bigger. And the farmers had to be bigger and bigger in debt with the banks, because who has to pay for all that? So the stress levels were rising and the happiness of farmers were going down. And so that system didn't feel right. And at the same time there was a lot of pressure from the pharmaceutical industries to veterinarians to use and sell as much medicines as you could. And that pressure is there, and it has financial benefits, and you're working really hard, also at night, also at Sundays, and because there are always farm emergencies, so you also think you deserve to earn your living, and so you are easily falling into the trap of selling way more antibiotics than is really needed. So that pressure of that industrial agriculture system was weighing heavier and heavier on me. And then I started to see more and more clearly the direct relationship between the soil, the plants, and the animals and the human beings. So a healthy, it's 1 + 1 is 2. It makes all the sense. But I was not so much aware of it in the beginning. A healthy soil gives healthy plants. The animals eat the plants, the grasses and the herbs, and the animals are more healthier. And then the products that we eat from those animals are also more nutritious, so you have healthier human beings, physically and mentally. And I saw also not a lot of space in the contrary, in the industrial agriculture system. There is not really attention for this, for the soil food web, for the health of the soil, for the diversity of the plants and the physical and mental well-being of the animals. We'll solve it mechanically with some more medicines. So that system, indeed, it's a circular and it's hard to get out of. And then, so that's Western Europe, and then I got to know a different story in Eastern Europe, in Romania, where there are still a lot of small farmers living. There's a few animals, and I went to their homes and to their small farms, and I saw the direct, more personal and humane animal-human relationship, which was very different than I experienced in Western Europe. So made a radical shift with my wife to move to a very small village in rural Transylvania to live with the peasants, the small farmers, and become one ourselves. And my wife is a mental health counselor from the United States. And so yeah, it was a radical shift for both of us to move to the rural countryside in Eastern Europe and become peasants, small farmers.
Yeah. I love the piece you said around your wife working with women in the police in the prison system and that correlation with you. Would you mind repeating that?
No. So it was interesting when I met my wife. She lived and worked in Atlanta, Georgia, United States, as a mental health counselor in a very, very big, over 1,000 women in a prison of women. And that was at the moment that I was still working in France as a veterinarian. And I had hardship with working with cows that were constantly captured in barns behind metal bars. When they were milked twice a day, they were all captured between metal bars. When we had to force vaccinate them for all kinds of diseases, they were captured in between metal bars. And my wife was working with women locked up behind metal bars. So we started to see kind of a similarity. And then we realized that the pharmaceutical industries that came to my door to push more medication for my women behind bars were the same exact companies that were knocking at her door to prescribe more and more medications to her women behind bars. So this similarity really shocked us and kind of was a big wake-up call for us. That's a system we wanted to break loose from and start an alternative. Definitely start an other way of life that our values are aligned with. Yeah. So that's what we did by moving back to the land and start farming.
And can you talk about the change in diet that the animals were having in France when you were in a more industrialized agricultural system versus Romania? How's that?
Well, in an industrial farming system there is grass pastures that have English ryegrass, so 90% is one kind of grass, and then maybe 10% there's room for some other. So there's no variety in diet. There's a lot of corn, and the big troublemaker is the soybeans that are transported from the other side of the globe, from South America, the Amazon. Everybody knows it. They destroy the Amazon to grow soybeans, which is turned into animal food, is transported to Europe, and there they grow a lot of pig meat and cow meat and a lot of milk for cheese and so on. So when I woke up to that fact, it was really, it was a deal breaker. And then in Transylvania, the pastures where the animals graze are often common land, so they're owned by the village. That's very rich, and they are very high in diversity. So there are many different plants and grasses and herbs and flowers. So animals know when they are not well how to medicate themselves. So they choose certain. Most plants have some medicine in them, some a whole lot and some less. But the animals know to find them. They can cure themselves. But if they don't have access to them, they can't. So an animal that can pasture in a field, and also with trees and bushes, because sometimes they just need some leaves or some berries, then they can keep themselves much healthier. Their overall state is much better, and also the milk, for instance, that they produce is much richer. A glass of milk from an industrial farm and a glass of milk from a small peasant farm in Transylvania, it's both white, you can both drink it, but the difference between them is day and night. It's absolutely not the same.
And so what would you say is the biggest difference you see in the health of the animals there? I mean, this idea that we need to use antibiotics for animal husbandry is quite common now. So
I did in the beginning years ethno-veterinarian research in the Carpathians in Romania in the mountains. I went to the oldest farmers and asked them, okay, what did you use when Western medication was not here yet? Because I wanted to figure out. And I had a few questions. So what did you do for this disease? What did you do for that disease? And for instance, udder infection, which is a disease in industrial farming that's all the time happening, and it needs that's what they sell, lots of antibiotics. They were all the time like, what are you talking about? with the udder, no, we don't have those problems. We don't have that. Sometimes I got the answer that they use some holy water, that they call, that once a year the priest blesses some water and they would wash if the udder is a little bit warm or it's a little bit off, or some smoke of willow bark. And aspirin comes from willow bark, so they found that out, that they smoked it, but rarely. Most of the farmers responded, no, never problem. And that's like a number one problem in industrial farming. And those cows, they die. There are bacteria, they go in the udder, and within 24 hours the cow is dead. So yeah, that's a very clear difference. Yeah.
Maybe go to the learning center a little bit.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your learning space now and how it runs?
Yeah, so we came to our village to become small farmers, and we also had to learn that. And besides some books and YouTube, we especially learned from our neighbors because they really knew the skills. They have a wealth of knowledge. So we learned a whole lot, and then we realized, we knew that a lot of other people would also want to have access to that knowledge. So we decided to open a learning center, which is called Provision Transylvania, and there we give courses about self-sufficient living, so how to grow food, agroecology, soil health, name it, regenerative living, and also combined. It's a living and learning center for regenerative living and non-violence. So we incorporate, because it's the inside and the outside. If you only are active on the outside, you will break down on the inside. If you only sit, meditate and yoga and you're not in action in the outside, it also doesn't work. So it's that combination. So we bring in non-violence and especially non-violent communication. So we give also courses in that realm, but then in a very farm setting, so that there's direct connection always with nature and food.
That's fabulous. So it's Provisions Transylvania.
Provision Transylvania.
And you do courses. Do you take volunteers?
We take volunteers and we do courses.
Throughout the
workshops.
Year.
Yeah.
Great.
That's good.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.